We're on lesson 5. I'm not sure what page it is yet. 44. All right. Like I said, I think we'll have some that continue to pop in from the back. All right. Amram and Jochebed. Anybody, don't raise your hand, anybody read that and have to think a little bit about who that was? I have to think just a little bit about, now wait a minute, I know those names, but who were they? Who were they? Well, not surprising if you have to do that because they are not mentioned very often. Miss Margaret, you and Dina and Kim all line up there, if you don't mind. Y'all all line up there. That'd be a good picture. Very little is known about Amram and Jochebed. Obviously, let's get everybody going this morning. Who are they? Parents of Moses. Okay, parents of Moses. So what is said about them in the Bible? Not much at all. We know a lot about what Jochebed did. We know the story of the great story of how she hid Moses and all that, and we'll talk about that. But other than that, she is not mentioned that often. Amram is not either that much. If you do too much digging, the author didn't say much about this. We are finding what tribe were they from? Tribe of what was Aaron eventually? Aaron was a priest, so they had to be from the tribe of Levi. Okay, they had to be from the tribe of Levi. They were both Amram and Jochebed were both from the tribe of Levi. And anybody do any family history? Who was Jochebed to Amram? Well, yes. So, Dodie, I didn't word that right. What was it before they got married? It was his aunt. That was his dad's sister. It's his dad's sister, okay? Yeah, it was his dad's sister. Yeah, it says black and white. I read it 3 or 4 times. Make sure it's his dad's sister. That's who it was, and that's what it says. And so once again, we see, just like we did last week when we were talking about Isaac and Rebekah, we see a very close relationship. That is something that I read was no longer allowed once the law of Moses was passed. Once the part of the law of Moses is that, that's the intermarrying that closely was not allowed anymore. But obviously this is before Moses was born, so this is part of the law, part of before the law. So she was his aunt, his father's sister. Okay, they had 3 children. I already mentioned Aaron. Who was the older sister? By Miriam. Okay, Miriam. And what is she called? Anybody know? She is called at least one time a prophetess. Okay, she is called a prophetess. So we see a family here of very interesting people. We see a family here, obviously, of Moses, Miriam, who's going to be a prophetess, and obviously Aaron, who is going to go on and be a judge or be a leader of the people. So that's the family right there. Okay, that's the family that we're talking about here. And we will, towards the end of the lesson today, we will get to the family part where we talk about, how the family, kind of how it all fits together here. So why was all this having to happen in the first place? We have a Pharaoh now who did not know who? Joseph. Okay. We have a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. Joseph had, of course, come from the land, from the Canaan, and had settled there and did a lot of great things for one of the pharaohs, basically saved the country from famine, more or less. And now enough time has passed that this Pharaoh does not know Joseph. all right? Does not know Joseph and the things he did. And he becomes very suspicious of the Jews. He becomes very suspicious of the Israelites. And he was warning them. A little conflict here from what I see. He wanted them under his control. I'm not sure he wanted them gone. We're going to talk about that a little later. I'm not sure he wanted them out of the country. He wanted them what? Under control. He wanted them under control. They were growing to the point that he said, if another nation attacks us, what could happen? They could join with that nation, and we could be in some real trouble. So we have got to keep this population of people. They were not Egyptians. They were obviously different. They were obviously different probably in the way they looked than the Egyptians. They were definitely different in the way they worshiped than the Egyptians. So it wasn't like they could blend in. This did not look like a society of people that would just blend in to the Egyptian nation. You know, it was something that they were very different. And the Pharaoh noticed that, and it worried him, and it worried him. So he wanted to bring them under control. So what are we going to do? What's the first step? We're going to work them so hard that they won't want to grow anymore. Okay, we're going to work them so hard that they won't either won't want to be here or something will change. Basically made them slaves. The word slaves is not used. Occasionally it is when talking about the Israelites in Egypt, but basically to make them slaves, to make them work on all the buildings and all the pyramids, whatever they're building is what all these fabulous tombs that they built for their kings and stuff. So they're gonna make them build, and they're gonna put them under the lash and really make them work hard. Well, what happened? What happened to do what? It backfired. How did it backfire? They prospered. They continued to grow. They continued to multiply and multiply and multiply. So this didn't work. Okay, this didn't work. It's something that the Pharaoh tried and it didn't work. I wonder about this Pharaoh. I'll be honest. You read a couple things about the Pharaoh here. Same thing with the Egyptian lineage. Is kind of like the Israelis that we're talking here. That there was a lot of intermarriage there, sure. And you read about this Pharaoh, and he made some terrible decisions. Some things you just wonder about. But anyway, so that didn't work. Making them work hard simply didn't work. But I think what they found out is they became dependent on the labor of the Israelis. Okay, they probably became pretty dependent on the labor of the Israelis. So when our time continues on here, and this is something we don't hear a lot about or think a lot about, but when time continues on here, why he was worried about them at first. He was worried about the Israelis and about them taking over. But by the time Moses comes along, and this is years down the road, by the time Moses comes along, what's the Israeli role? What's the role of the Israelites in Egypt? Back at this time, he would have just said, go. When it first started, just go. But Moses says, let my people go, and the answer is what? No. Why? They'd become dependent on them, Margaret. They had become dependent on the Israelites to do these things. So we see a change here that we don't think about too much, in that when the Pharaoh first became afraid of the Israelites, I think probably wanting them gone was a thing. I think they contributed to the economy even before they became slaves. So we see a little change here. We see a little change. They kept growing. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the next step here in a minute. We're not quite there yet, but we're going to talk about the next. We know what he tries next, but I'm going to do a couple other things here for a minute or two. We're going to see, if you read, and I didn't read the passage because they are so familiar and they're kind of long. You see that when Jochebed, the story of Jochebed is told, and then when we see in Hebrews later, we'll read the Hebrew thing there, the passage out of Hebrews, it's short, that says the things Jochebed did and the thing Moses did, what? By two words, by faith. you see the words by faith used a lot. So we know the faith of Jochebed and Moses both, and maybe Amram, but he's not used specifically. We know their faith was very strong. Okay, that's an important part of the story. They had faith in God, all right? They'd been removed from their homeland for many years. They didn't know their homeland, but they still had faith in God. They were faithful people, okay? By faith, Jochebed did this. By faith, Moses did this. Later when we get to talking about that. So that's a big deal. And the last thing before we get into the next step of the Pharaoh here, I think the story of Joseph and what happened is very interesting. Not just in a country. You talk about a country or a civilization. Let's call them civilizations. You talk about a civilization, but you also talk about a family unit. You talk about a town. You talk about a lot of different things. What happens over time? What happens over time? Things change, okay? Things change over time. Joseph was celebrated for a long time as the savior of the people of Egypt. The way he could interpret dreams and all these things that he did was incredible. Saved the people of Egypt from starvation during the famine. But what happened eventually? That was forgotten, okay? That was forgotten. So people who do great things, time periods and countries, things like that, don't ever forget that time passes and things change, okay? Time passes and things change. We look back sometimes and we say what? What do we wish for? The good old days, Jim. We wish for the good old days, all right? And there's something to be said for that. That's okay. That's okay to wish for the good old days in a lot of ways. And some things are good about them, but when we think back, sometimes what? We have kind of a, what's it called, a rose-colored view. We look through rose-colored glasses at those good old days sometimes, And would you want things the way they were when you were children? Some things, yes, absolutely. I guarantee you some things you say yes. But if you're around before indoor plumbing, what? Maybe you don't want the good old days again, So that really caught my attention when I was studying this lesson, is that no matter how things are at one time, they are going to change, okay? Maybe not during your lifetime. Maybe during your grandkids or your great-grandkids' lifetime. Things are going to change, and they're going to be different, okay? The Romans, the Greeks, they never dreamed, their civilizations were so great, they never dreamed in a million years they'd be gone. And now we look at them, what? They've been gone for a long time. It's just history now, okay? It's just history. So guess what? What's happening now, what happened 10 years ago, what happened 10 years from now, in about 100 years is what? It's history. It's going to be history, okay? So, yeah. That's right. Yep. They may have had cars somewhere else. They didn't have it. Yeah. You think, man, that person lived from horses to airplanes, space shuttles, all that stuff. Yeah. And you say something about a CD to a kid now? No, they don't have any, no clue. What's a CD? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The internet, we're getting to a point. We're about probably 20 or 30 years away from not a lot of people being around that don't remember the internet. So it's that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. So once again, just Joseph is the example here, but this is a good lesson in that as. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, I'd say so, probably. Yeah. That's right. No, wasn't in the country 300 years ago. That's right. So, yep. And we have a little better record keeping than they had at the time. So we might nobody might not ever forget George Washington. I don't know, but I guarantee you people do not realize the impact George Washington had on this country now that the people did 200 years ago. They, oh yeah, he's the father of our country, and people chop down the cherry tree and all that stuff. But people don't realize that without Washington, I don't know, if you study history and you look at the Revolutionary War and you take Washington out of it, it could have been a big difference, So anyway, any thoughts on that? Thank you, Dodie. Any other thoughts on that? Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yeah. 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 Next door. That's right. That's definitely a change, Kenny. Yep. Some things were better, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Some things were better, but and just an example, I know, Kenny, I bet this morning when you got up to come to church, you were glad you got to put that little key in there and turn it instead of getting the horses out of the barn, hitching them to the wagon, on the horse and buggy. All right. All right. Yep. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. Yep. Thanks, Kenny. I like that. It's a good example. Go ahead. You had something else, I think. No, you good? Okay. All right. All right. All right. Let's move on to trouble in Egypt on page 47. We already know what the trouble is. They became slaves. Here's the part where here's the part that you wonder a little bit about the Pharaoh a little bit. After the labor didn't work, to slow down the Israelites, what was his next plan? He told the midwives to do what? He got very serious. It took a turn to the violent here. He told the midwives to do what? Kill the males. That's right, kill the males. Here's the problem. What midwives did he tell to do this? The Hebrew midwives. He told the Hebrew midwives to kill the firstborn. That's their own people, So what do you think they did? Of course they didn't do it. Of course they didn't do it, That's their own, these are their people. These are their people. So the fact that the Pharaoh, I guess maybe he was too overconfident in his power. He thought whatever he said, what? They'll do. Whatever I say, they will do. Of course, we know about the Pharaohs. They considered themselves what? Gods, lowercase g. They considered themselves gods. So, well, if I tell these Hebrew midwives to kill the male children, they'll do it. No, not so much. That's very naive of him to think that that's what would happen, and it's not what happened. The Hebrew midwives continued to deliver the male children without killing them, and when the Pharaoh questioned them, because obviously he noticed that they were continuing to grow, what did he say? What did they say? What did they say? They said, these Hebrew women are too, I forget what he called them, there's a word, strong is the word, but that's not the word he said. Or they said, these Hebrew women are too strong. By the time we get there, what? They had these children delivered. These children are already delivered by the time we get there. Okay? That's what the Hebrew midwives told them. My thing would be, if he wants the male children killed, this sounds awful. Why didn't he do it himself? I think he wanted to do this kind of secretively. I think he wanted the midwives to do it and say, oh, it was an accident, or all this is just happening, But they said we couldn't kill them at birth because they're already delivered when we get there, which was not true. The Bible's pretty clear about that was not really what was happening, but that's what they told. That's what they told the Pharaoh. Okay, that's what they told the Pharaoh. So That plan is not working. Okay, that plan is not working either. So, but it was still out there. It was still an issue. That decree was out there. So for Hebrew women, for Israelite women, they knew that their male children were in danger. Even if the midwives weren't doing it, they knew that their children, very possibly, they were in danger. Okay, so that's what leads us to what Miriam did. Okay, so let's get to the story of Moses now. That all leads up to the actual story of Jochebed and Amram, and at least and more specifically Moses. So when Moses is born, what happens? Now we know she don't send him down the river first. What did she do for 3 months? Hides him. She hides him. Okay, which is very possible. You know, which is a small infant. Probably it's very possible to hide him. And a little thing that could be a little misleading, not necessarily. What does it say when Moses is born? Do you remember? I'll let you fill in the blank because that's a tough question. Beautiful. That's right. Beautiful or fine. She saw the child was what? Beautiful. She saw the child was fine. Okay. Now, that sounds bad, doesn't it? What's something we can infer from that? So, you know what I'm going to say here. So if it was an ugly baby, she wouldn't have done all this. If it's an ugly baby, she wouldn't have done all this. But the child was beautiful. No, that's not the case. That's not what we're looking at here. Once again, I'm not a wordsmith, or I'm not one of those guys who knows all about the translations and stuff. But I can read people who do know those things, and it says basically she had the love for a child that any mother would. Okay. Any of you in here, anybody, when your child is born, what are you going to say? They're beautiful, okay? And they are. That's exactly right, okay? So my understanding of that is, the best I could tell from doing a little research on that, is that she had the same love for her child that all mothers have for their children. And in her eyes, what? He was beautiful, and she didn't want anything to happen. Didn't want anything to happen to him, all right? That's just a little extra. I don't know if that helps you any or not, but if you just read it, if you just take it at face value, it almost looks like if the child hadn't been beautiful, she might not have hit him and went to all this trouble, but I don't think that's the case, all right? All right, so she has this plan. She's going to, we know about how she builds the thatch basket that she's put him in. We've all built those in VBS, right? Everybody's built a thatch basket sometime in their life at VBS. So she builds this basket for Moses, and the child is starting to, crying louder and things like that. So after 3 months, she doesn't think she can hide the child anymore. So she puts him in the basket and floats him down the river. And who's watching out? Miriam. Yeah, Miriam's watching out. Miriam's watching this and kind of seeing what's happening here. Now, here's one thing that the Bible is not specific on, and it doesn't have to be, but something that people have questioned or thought about, just something to think about. Did Jochebed put Moses in the river in a particular spot where she knew where that baby might end up? We don't know that, but I think that's an interesting question. I think if we're going to look at a story that we've all heard since we were this high, I think it's good to think about some things maybe we haven't before. And I read some things that said possibly Jochebed put Moses in a spot where she knew this baby would end up where? Along the Pharaoh's palace, right there. So that's very possible. I'll be honest, I never really thought about that. In my thought of the story, wherever she lived, she put Moses in, and wherever he landed, okay? But it makes sense. It makes sense to think, hey, maybe there was some thought put into this. Maybe they put Moses in the river, because you can tell which way the river's flowing and all that. Maybe they put Moses in a place where she knew who would pick him up, And I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, Kenny, that's my next line right there is, yeah. Yep. Yeah, yeah. A lot of things could happen. Kenny, we're talking about a river and a thing. The thing could have turned over. Moses could have drowned very easily, you know. Who wants to take the chance of putting their 3-month-old on the Mississippi River here and just see what happens? You know, that's not something we would do, you know. So Kenny makes a good point, and that was actually the next thing I had written down, Kenny, is that God's hand was in this. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. God's hand was in this. And you know, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to make a case for God knew what Moses was going to do before he was born. God knew his people were not going to be in Egypt forever. God knew somebody was going to lead his people out of Egypt, and it was going to be Moses. I think it's pretty easy, depending on, I won't say depending on your faith. That's not what I mean. I mean, but by faith. By faith, reading the story of Moses, in my opinion, this is just in my view of it, it's pretty clear to me that God didn't just choose Moses when he was an adult to lead his people out of Egypt. This was designed from the get-go. Moses' role in biblical history was designed from the beginning, okay, from the beginning. At least the beginning of Moses' life, for sure. So when the basket floats, it washes up, whatever you call it, to the Pharaoh's palace. The Pharaoh's daughter, she sees the child, has mercy on the child, different from her father. She has mercy on the child. Miriam, the spy, is in the right place at the right time. She goes to the princess and says, hey, and obviously they knew it was a Hebrew baby. They could tell it was a Hebrew baby. Hey, do you want me to find you want me to find a Hebrew woman to nurse this child for you? You know, to nurse the child, which had to be done at the time, to bring him up, you know, to help and all that. She said yes. Miriam goes and gets her mom, and just a perfect story, you know, exactly the way that they wanted to turn it out, wanted it to turn out, much like Kenny said, with the hand of God. So they're being taken care of. Now, what happens? Let's see. How do I want to word this? What's the benefit of Moses' actual mother, his real mother, getting brought into this picture and bringing him up? That's right, Rick. His faith is developed. That's right. He's living in the palace of the Pharaoh, but what is he taught by his mother? Like Rick says, faith in God, but not just faith in God, which is the main thing. It's not just faith in God. That's right. The way of his people, the way of the Hebrews, their afflictions, their trials, all the things, whatever, all the things they've been through, what's the word I'm looking for? Heritage, yes. Their traditions, yes, all that. He's taught all that. So when Moses grows up, what does he have? He's got the experience of living in the palace, all the benefits of living in the palace, but he's also got all the benefits of knowing about God and knowing about his heritage, his tradition, okay? And that's going to be extremely important, because what's he going to choose? He's going to choose his people eventually. He's going to choose to go live with his people. Moses goes through some hard times before all this, but he is going to eventually choose to live with his people. Would that have happened if he had been brought up in the palace? If his mother had not had weaned him until nobody knows exactly what age, but whatever, several years, probably several years of taking care of him. If that had not happened, what do we think? We can easily surmise about Moses. What? Nobody would have taught him that. Nobody else in the palace would have taught Moses about God, would have taught Moses, would have given him his faith, would have taught him about his people. So that is where we're going to spend. We've only got about 10 minutes left, and that's perfect, because that's about what this will take. That's what we're going to concentrate on the rest of the time here, okay? The importance of what Jochebed did for Moses in teaching him his faith and teaching him his heritage, okay? That is, I believe, from reading the Bible in my interpretation, that is one of the main objectives of us as parents is to raise our kids to know God and to know about the Bible and to understand that. Now, once again, like we've talked about here in a million times, that's not always the case. Children, they're free moral agents, just like we all were as children, just like we still are. And that doesn't mean that different decisions will be made. That doesn't mean that different outcomes will happen, okay? But what it means is that you are responsible as a parent for teaching them about God and teaching them about, the Bible and things like that. Now, I'll stand by that statement. I won't go much further than that about what the outcomes are and all that kind of thing, because we all know things happen. But it is our responsibility as parents to teach our children those things, and then what they do with them eventually when they become of age is up to them. But that's what Miriam did. That's what Miriam did for Moses. She taught him about God, and it stuck, and he became very faithful. I'm going to get my phone out because this is so weird right here to me. We're going to read Hebrew. We're going to read the Hebrews thing on page 46 right there. So go back to the top of page 46. Get my phone off here. Okay. Starting in verse 23. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a beautiful child and they were afraid of the king's command. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of the Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. And then verse 26, see. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. That is left out of this, and I think that's important. And the author even refers to that later. So the fact that the author refers to this verse, I'm not sure why they just didn't put one more verse in there, but I'm going to read that again. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Okay? He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as greater than the treasure of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. I think that's a deep statement right there at the end, because he was looking ahead to his reward. He believed in God there was a reward. He did not see that in whatever the Egyptians worshiped, whatever they did. He saw this. So by faith, Moses did what he did. Now, where did he get that faith? From his parents, okay? From his parents. Moses did what he did by faith, and that faith came from his parents, okay? They instilled that in him. Page 51. This is, you don't have to find this is just a quote here. The training he received from Amram and Jochebed helped prepare him for this task. Similarly, Christian parents today must seek to prepare and equip their children to live faithfully in a world that is not. All right. What do we know about Moses, though? Did Moses, fill in the blank, when Moses was of age and it was time for him to lead the people out of Egypt, he was raring and ready to go, Rick? No. He fought it all he could. He fought with God, argued with God. I'm not the man for the job. I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm not very good at this. I'm not very good at that. So Moses had faith, but Moses also had struggles, just like we do. Okay, he had faith, but he also had struggles. All right, but once again, hopefully this base of faith he had. Finally, he told God, okay, God wouldn't take no for an answer, and he told God, okay, I'll do it. I'm ready. God told him, I'll use your brother Aaron, a lot of things. Kenny?
That was 40 years after he was sold out of Egypt.
Very much so, yes. Yeah. So he'd been herding sheep or whatever for 40 years. That's right. And probably thought what, Kenny? Probably thought what? This is my life. Yeah. Moses, after he'd been out of Egypt that long, You think he ever dreamed God was going to come back and lead him back into Egypt? Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. He's out doing what he'd been doing probably every day for the last however many years he'd been doing it. And notice what? Jim, that bush is on fire, but it's not being consumed, you know. And from that point on, one moment can change your life. And from the time Moses saw that burning bush, what happened to his world? It was turned upside down. Absolutely turned upside down. Couple applications. The two big applications here. God played a role in what went on. God played a role in the story of Moses' life, absolutely. And through God's role, his parents played a very important role in his life as well. He was taught, you know, he had the opportunity to be taught. Now, a lot of other Hebrew children did too. A lot of other Hebrew children were taught by their parents as well. But the situation Moses was in, excuse me, the situation Moses was in, being in the palace, being familiar with the ways of the Egyptians, and having that Hebrew background obviously made him the perfect choice. Like Kenny said down the road 40 years later, made him the perfect choice to do this. All right. Any thoughts or comments? We had some good discussion early, but I've kind of been talking for a while. Anything else? What do you think about anything else when you think about the story of Moses? Yes. Fled. Mm-hmm. That was a big, that's right. That's exactly right. Yep, I like that. Yep, yeah. We can teach Bible stories and we can teach everything in the Bible, but I like that. Your faith is very personal. That's right. You cannot make somebody have faith. Can't make them drink. That's right. Yep. You can give your children every opportunity. You can give them every opportunity to be faithful, but they have to choose the faith. And yes, that is once he killed that Egyptian and then ran away. That was because his own people called him on it. You know, he killed an Egyptian, and two Hebrews were in an argument, and he tried to step in there. And what did they say? You remember? No, he didn't. That's right. They said, "What? You gonna kill us too?" You know. He said, "Uh-oh. You know, something's going on here." So, good, very good point. Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much. Hope everybody's able to stay for Church Eat Church today. Todd, we got plenty of food.